Hello and welcome to The Wire. I'm Soumashree. People have been performing aarti on the streets of Varanasi and holding marches with posters saying Bharat Russia Friendship Zindabad. There is a joint op ed by the ambassadors of France, the United Kingdom, and Germany in the Times of India, which urges India to use its influence with Moscow over the Ukraine conflict. Luxury hotel tariffs have apparently soared in Delhi. All of these disparate points uh, tell us that one single event is afoot in Delhi and that it is ruling the headlines today. And that's Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to India. This visit marks Putin's first trip to India since 2021. It also coincides with the 25th anniversary of the India Russia Strategic Partnership. To help the wire decode this visit and why it is so very important for India, we have Devirupa Mitra, the wire's diplomatic editor, with us. Devirupa, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for calling me.
The last meeting between Putin and Modi, as we know, was just 3 months ago at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization's Tianjin summit. You had reported on it extensively, and the two leaders were photographed alongside China's Xi Jinping. And they were pictured together in great bonhomie, holding hands and sharing jokes as well. And these were optics that prompted much anger from Donald Trump, who took to his Truth social media app. Um, the understanding, however, seems to be that India is in a bit of a geopolitically fraught space. And the US has imposed tariffs on India, and India is seeing Russia react to its dialing down of the purchase of Russian oil. Against this backdrop, uh, people have called it politically treacherous times for India. Why would you say Putin's visit is significant, and will it give India what it hopes for in this scenario?
I think speaking to the Ministry of External Affairs officials, even they are very surprised by the amount of interest that this visit is generating because they see it as a context of annual visit. We have annual summits between the Indian and Russian leaders in which the Indian and Russian leaders go to each other country in every alternate year since 2000. So this is a 23rd annual summit. So it's basically an annual event for us for the Indian and Russian bilateral relationship. But of course, it is being viewed in the whole wider geopolitical context, and therefore there is a great deal of interest, perhaps very unusually high interest this time. Um, Obviously, like you mentioned, that it comes after Putin will be visiting to India for the first time after the Ukraine invasion in February 2022, and his last time he was here in December 21, just a few months before that. But the context, obviously, right now is that India Russia relationship is being seen as part of Russia's war of Ukraine, especially in European countries. It's European and American countries. And that's the reason that Trump had also imposed 25% tariffs on India, which increased the entire total tariff on India to 50%. And that 25% was as punitive measure for buying oil from Russia, even though India is the only buyer which is being punished, and it is the second largest buyer, not even the highest buyer of oil from Russia, and the highest buyer is of course China. But it has to be seen. Also, the reason that this visit is creating a bit of a dilemma for India is that right now, obviously, we are in the midst of trade talks with US, and we have to finalize a trade deal as early as possible so that these tariffs of 50%, which is the highest in the world, come down as substantially as possible. Also, at the same time, we also in the midst of the last leg of negotiating a free trade agreement with the European Union. And this free trade agreement is also we have kind of a self-imposed deadline for the free trade agreement, because the European Union leadership will be coming to India next month, or we have been informally told that they are the chief guests for the Republic Day celebrations. So it would be highly important for the free trade agreement to be in place, or at least to be signed, or to be or at least for the leadership to see that it has been finalized when the European Union leaders are here. So this is the context, wider context of the visit, and also that it is at the same time that this is a month that actually the India's oil trade with Russia will dip substantially, will at least come down almost half because of the sanctions. The sanctions that were imposed announced in October by on the basically the largest two largest oil state oil Russian majors, and that's two companies that from which in India buys oil both from the private sector and the public sector. So it was about 1.8 million barrel per day that India was buying oil from Russia, and it's expected, according to analysts, to come down to about half, about 1 million barrel per day, 1 million MBD, what is called, this month. So let's see. So it's basically a very interesting time for the visit to happen. But we are still not sure if the deliverables will be um, that great, because we have a lot of agreements that they're talking about. For example, in healthcare, academics, culture. Then media, perhaps media between the agreement cooperation between the state media operators, but as major deals I'm not sure there'll be a major deliverable, except maybe there will be agreement on the mobility, but again it's not in the same, this mobility agreement will not be in the same level as what India had for example agreed with Israel, in which they had said there's a certain number of Indians who will be allowed to go there, because that was between the Israeli government straight recruiter and the government side here. And this is not at that level. This is not between the two government, the manpower agencies in India and in Russia. It's basically to act only as a facilitator for the private manpower agencies in Russia to look for adequate labor to be recruited from India. So there's still we haven't got any numbers for that also. So let's see, like, what are the major deliverables is still not very clear.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, Devirupa, is that Putin arrives in Delhi after he said no to the latest Ukraine peace proposal that was put forward by the US. And I'm curious as to what role India can have at this stage. We often have reported pieces on Indians who are stuck fighting on the front line in the Russia Ukraine conflict. There have been almost direct requests to Prime Minister Narendra Modi asking for some degree of help so that they can return. Do you see India being able to forge some sort of an understanding so that Indian citizens who are fighting the war on behalf of Russia as soldiers can get some degree of assurance that they can come back?
According to the Russian side, they've always said to the Indian that they are not recruiting any Indians directly. And according to the stories that we are getting from these Indians who are stuck with the Russian army, they are very cleverly, they're not basically, there's a lot of plausible deniability there, because they are recruited by some other agencies, some private agencies, for example. And then they find themselves, then they sign the contract with those agencies, and somehow they find themselves then stuck and sent to the front lines, and many of them are killed. So according to the latest numbers that we were given, I think last month, by the Indian government, there are about 44 Indians right now working with the Russian army and then the front lines. But again, like we were given a briefing before the visit, and they were very categorical in saying that this 44 number is also not a very clear number for them. This is based on the number of, for example, the family members who may have approached the Indian embassy there. So then actually they don't know how many Indians may be actually working with the Russian army. And the Russians have always said that they are willing to release them, but again, it takes a lot of time, because they actually go by the fine print of the contract. So they will eventually make the people who are alive. Will eventually get released, but I don't think there's any guarantee that they will not be again, that other Indians will not find themselves again in the Russian army. Because if you remember the last time when Indian Prime Minister was there for the annual summit, he went to uh, to Russia in 2024, July 2024. And then we were also told that Russia had specifically said, we were told with the Indian side, let's be very clear, that Russia had said that they won't be recruiting any other Indians then. And after that, a lot of them were released, sure. But again, we are getting again numbers of stories from Punjab, from Gujarat, of Indians stuck there, and obviously this very heartbreaking story of that Indian who is now in Ukraine in custody, and whose story that we carried earlier this week.
One
And also, sorry to answer your other part of the question. No, I don't think there's any scope as to be realistic. I don't think there is scope for India to be mediating or be part of the Ukraine peace plan. I mean, we have been only saying, and I think every country has been saying that military. I mean, all these disputes cannot be solved militarily and has to be solved politically, and so that's what we have been saying, that there's no era for war, and it was hyped up, and that's what we had said to Putin, Russian President Putin, when Modi met him again a few years ago. But and it was again specifically told to us again and again that we are not looking to be mediators, because mediation is something that is very sensitive for us politically, diplomatically. Because, for example, we also are in a dispute with Pakistan. We cannot look for, we are very sensitive about third party mediation. So if we start looking at thinking or even contemplating that, I don't think, first of all, it has ever occurred in the minds of the Indian government to be a third party mediator. Maybe it's a good way to project for the supporters of the government, to show that it is very much in the play, that it is, we are part of the one of the great powers right now. But it's not a realistic thing to be assuming that we have any role at all to play.
One last question for you, Devirupa. Opposition MP from the Samajwadi Party, Dimple Yadav, she told PTI today that there's been a departure from tradition in the last few years. And earlier, when leaders like Putin would arrive to Delhi, they would meet with opposition leaders. But that has somehow been phased out in the last few years. You've been covering the space for a really long time. What's been your experience on this? Do you feel that most of the attention now falls on just one person, but the prime minister, when foreign leaders arrive?
Yeah, I've been covering the beat for too long, actually. I mean, since the Manmohan Singh government, the nuclear deal time. So the tradition has always been that we used to always see the advisory that has to come out about the visits of any foreign leaders, and it was always standard that the foreign leader would be meeting the leader of opposition there. It was always done. And it was usually, I think at that time, leader of opposition was LK Advani, if I'm not mistaken, and there were others later on, maybe. But after it drastically changed after 2014, when the Prime Minister Modi took over, and I think there was perhaps immediately after his taking over, there was maybe one visit foreign leader in which they had a leader of opposition meeting listed there, but after that immediately it was disappeared. Basically, there was no listed meetings with any leader of opposition. And I think also at that time there was a indication that there was an issue about who was the leader of opposition at that time, because I think Congress did so badly that there was a concern. So they had a plausible excuse at that time. Who would they meet actually? Who would they lead? Who's the largest party? Who should be the leader of opposition? That any foreign leader. But after that, nobody then started to question or were raising any points about that. But even though I remember when we first saw that there was no meeting of any leader of opposition with foreign leaders, it was raised in the MEA brief. Weekly briefings, and I don't remember the answer, but I think it was something on the lines that it was usually the prerogative of the host, it's usually the protocol that is followed during the visit, incoming visit, is based on the protocol of the host. Usually it's not of it's the protocol of the government, of the other visitor, basically. So that's how it has been. I mean, and it's after so long that it is rare, it is surprising to hear, but it's good to hear, because I think it's always good to hear that the visitor should be foreign visitor should be allowed to meet the opposition also, because that was the usual tradition, and it was also a sign of vibrant Indian democracy. And when the Indian PM goes abroad, for example, he went to Sri Lanka, or goes to Maldives, or he went to Bangladesh, or any other Nepal, for example, or any other country, he usually meets always the opposition leaders also, from the leaders of other political parties. So that is also standard for the Prime Minister Modi to meet leaders of other parties, because that's it's a good tradition, because you have to always have links with other parties. Who knows which party will come, come in after that, because there's all usually in democracies only you will have parties. When you're going to an autocratic country, you don't need to meet people from other parties because they are not really politically relevant.
That's a great note from you, Devirupa, and a great point at which we can possibly end this live. Thank you for giving us the primer on Putin's visit. We'll have lots of news on this, a lot of it from you on the wire. And that's it from us today. Thank you.
Thank you.